Good afternoon, members of the Land Development Team Oversight Committee. Welcome to your inaugural meeting. I am Rebecca Bjork. I would like to start this meeting by asking Ms. Kukinda to take a roll call.
Thank you so much. Council Member Alejandra Gutierrez.
Here.
Council Member Eric Friedman.
Here.
And Council Member Michael Jordan.
Here.
Thank you.
So as I indicated when we opened this meeting, for the members of the public, this is the first meeting of the Land Development Team Oversight Committee. This is a subcommittee established by the council to work with staff on the implementation of the recommendations for improving the land development team process. Next slide, please. We've done the roll call. Thank you. And next slide. So this is our overview of our agenda for today. We will have introductions and selection of the chair for the committee. Then we will be going through the committee purpose and scope, the frequency of meetings, do a brief overview of the Novak report and assignment of the priority tasks, establishing essentially the priority tasks, and then adjourn. So with that, next slide, please. And before we get into introductions, I just want to say that while the majority of the land development team obligations are within the community development department, it is an interdepartmental team comprised of staff from various different parts of the organization, all with an interest of making sure that our community is developed in a way that is safe, protective of public health and the environment, and meets state codes, regulations, and city priorities. It's comprised of staff from community development planning and building and safety, public works department, engineering, transportation planning and water resources, the fire department, the parks and recreation department in the Creeks division, and the sustainability and resilience department through the environmental services division. Next slide, please.
So part of my interruption, I just want to let you know that there does seem to be just a slight delay.
So this is the Oversight Committee, and we have the council members who have been identified. And at this point in time, I would like to invite the Oversight Committee to select a chair for this meeting, at which point I will ask you to take over the management of the meeting.
So I'll jump right in. I'd love to nominate the senior standing member of this group, and that's Mr. Friedman.
If there are no others, I'd be glad to chair this. And it is kind of strange being the senior member of council, being only 2 years on the job. So, but yes, I'd be happy to if my colleagues would want to nominate me as chair.
I nominate Mr. Friedman as well.
Okay, well, thank you all. Do we need to vote on that, Ms. Bjork, or are we good to go? And
it looks like you have it by acclamation, but just to be sure, why don't you take a quick vote?
Okay, can I get a motion for nominate myself as the chair, I guess?
That sounds so good. I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
There's a second. Can I do a roll call vote, please?
Yeah, Councilmember Jordan?
Aye.
Councilmember Gutierrez?
Aye.
And Councilmember Friedman?
Yes. Thank you, my colleagues. And so from here, per the agenda, I guess I will take over from here, Ms. Bjork. And the next item on the list is the meeting on the agenda is item.
Mr. Friedman, I think we can continue. I can take us through the slide presentation, but if you will manage the council actions and the public comment, calling public comment, that would be terrific.
Perfect. So I'll let you continue on. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I'll go to the next slide, please. So the first thing is I wanted to affirm the committee's purpose and scope. And my understanding from the council action is that this committee has been developed to advise the land development team staff and oversee the implementation of process improvements as recommended by the Novak consulting group. And with that, I'd be happy to take any input from council, from the committee member if there's any discussion on that item.
Open it up to my colleagues. Any comments at this point? Mr. Jordan, I see your hands up, so.
So, Ms. Bjork, I'm just wondering, what happens if we stumble over something else that's not a bullet on those 2 pages of specific actions, but you can make a nexus to it should be done, or it wasn't on there, but it's part of one of those nexuses, but something different. Will we run into problems with that language that we need to get resolved now, or do you see us as having that option to pursue stuff like that?
I think we could make it more broad very easily by just saying something to the effect of land development team staff oversee implementation of process improvements and issues and related issues, essentially, to the Novak report. Because of course, This is the recommendation of a consulting team, and you and staff, through our experience with this process, may have slightly different interpretations that could move a little away. So I think that would be very wise.
That'd be great, because as you know, once you kind of see one idea, it leads to 3 others once you see it. So that would be great.
Okay. Any further comments, Councilmember Jordan? Councilmember Gutierrez, any comments at this point? Okay. Turn it back over to you, Ms. Bjork.
Thank you. So we will capture that in the minutes and bring it back and make sure we got it right next time. So with that, next slide, please. So the purpose and scope continued is to review and provide input on procedural changes. We will bring those to you with our recommendations as we go along as a sounding board to make sure that we are moving in a direction that's consistent with what this committee and the public is expecting, as well as to provide input on some of the bigger issues of the municipal code, board and commission guidelines, and the city charter. So you can see this is a fairly significant level of work, and it will take some time. So we expect that we will be bringing you reports of items that we agree with in the report and that are easily implemented, and we hope to be fairly quickly able to report out that we've done it, and here is how we have done it. The results for having done it may take a while, but at least being able to report out on what we are doing and putting in place so the community is aware of the changes that we're making. And then providing other input to the land development management team, excuse me. Next slide, please. So this is staff's recommendation in thinking about council frequency and the workload that's needed here. It seems to me that it makes sense for us to meet monthly through October. And then as we get into November and December, people's schedules get very busy with breaks for holidays. So I would propose we take a small break for November, December, and then resume in January. And at that time, ask the committee at what frequency they would like to continue to meet. So Chair Friedman, I would.
Any comments on the schedule at this point? I think this sounds very reasonable going forward and kicking us off.
Thank you. Okay, hearing no objection, we'll continue. So with that, I want to move right into the guts of the meeting, which is an overview of the Novak report. Next slide, please. So the Novak report commenced in August of, was delivered in August of 2020, but it commenced last year. And it included a scope of, the scope of study included review of the entire land development team process, not, as I mentioned, not just the community development work. Their methodology included interviewing 55 staff, conducting a number of focus groups, conducting a survey to users of the system, and then conducting a 3-day process improvement exercise with staff line staff generally from the different sections of the land development team process. So they did a fairly rigorous evaluation of the land development team process, including mapping several different kinds of projects to see how they actually had moved through that process in order to identify any potential issues or barriers that we might need to address. Next slide, please. So with that, moving into the recommendations. The recommendations have been organized in the report by subject area. They've identified vision, outcomes, and customer service, intake and application screening, technology and performance measurement, process clarity and consistency, design review process, and staffing and organizational structure. These are not listed in any particular order other than grouping together sets of recommendations. And in the next series of slides, I will be walking through the staff's initial cut on the very first things we think we should be focusing on to work with this committee. So with that, let's start with the next slide, please. So starting with the vision, outcomes, and customer service area, and just so you can understand how we've got this organized, this first slide outlines what those recommendations were. And the next slide, rather than read through all these, I'd like to just jump to the next slide, please, and indicate that we believe that a very good starting place is to define the land development team vision. We really think that that needs to set the stage for the conversations about what we're doing. This is what we want to look like, and this is how the steps that we're taking to improve our process fit in with what we want to look like. We are also doing a number of things, establishing and enforcing land development team meeting attendance and expectation. That is just do it. We will give that direction to staff and we will start to enforce that. That seems like a simple one. We need to have an engaged land development team. We have underway to update the city's website and other communication tools and to develop tools to educate customers about the land development process. Now, while it would be ideal to wait and do those things once we've got everything working, we really think that these are tools that we will continue to need to visit and update. So we recognize that our initial steps may not be our final steps, but we think that we should get started on those things, and we are getting started on those things at the current time. The things that we on this list that we are not putting at the top priority, because I believe that there's a sequencing issue, is creating and communicating the service level and process expectations. So we need some work on process as well as identifying that vision that will help us to set the service level expectations. So that's why that's not on this just do it early list. And then establishing a customer service training program for land development team staff. Again, we think we have some work to do on process before we start training the staff on that process. And finally, updating the phone tree to provide more direct routes of communication is something that we recognize very much needs to be done. And we may need to have that be one of those other iterative systems where we are doing that on several occasions to make incremental improvement in getting phone calls where they need to go. So that will not, it's not on our first cut list, but it's certainly one that we will continue to look at and keep working on. Next slide, please. For the vision, which, as I said, will set the overall arching goals for this process. I think it's important for a vision to have the buy-in of those who are executing that vision. And so my proposal is that we will be working with the land development team leadership staff to come up with a vision that resonates and it allows us to be the type of land development team to assist our community in the way that we believe that it should be assisted. And we will be bringing that back to your committee at the next meeting. That's one of the very first thing that we want to get back to you with is our proposed draft vision for your input review and any thoughts or considerations you might have about a vision statement. Next slide, please. So the next section is intake and application screening. There were a few recommendations. And so as with before, we really need to assess right at the beginning This is one of the first things we need to do is which staff are involved in review and when. And this goes back to the just do it of having land development team staff available in the projects when they're needed. Making sure that we have a commitment from all of our team members as to if they need to be involved in project review, that they are there and involved. And there's sometimes when they don't. Some projects don't go through the entire land development team. In fact, many don't. And then the other really high priority for us is to create clear standards for application screening. We don't want somebody to submit an application and then wait weeks to find out that they've missed some piece of it. We want to be able to have that meeting with them early in the process and give them clear expectations that, yes, they've submitted something that is good for review, that doesn't have huge gaping holes that we know when we get to the more in-depth level of review that we're just going to have to turn it around and say you're missing all these things. So that's a very high priority for us. And then the established thresholds for mediation will come later. Excuse me. Next now.
Ms. Berg, I have a question
Yes.
on the intake. If you go back just a slide.
Sure.
I see those are the two priorities. And maybe you'll get there at a later time, but also as a part of it was identifying where an applicant would come into the process, because I think that's a big component of it. So would that be, because right now the report says there's 3 potential ways that they could go, so it creates a different path and it gets into the lack of clarity sometimes. Would that be under bullet point 2 that you would be assessing that, or would that be a separate bullet point that you'd be assessing at a later time?
Councilor Friedman, excuse me, Chair Friedman, I believe that that is a recommendation in a later portion. But no, in very preliminary conversations with members of the team, I think establishing a clear starting point is one of the early things that we want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. So the next area is the technology and performance measurement and 2 recommendations. And the primary thing that I want this committee to know is that the city is in the process and has a current advertisement for an Acela, which is the software tool that we use to manage our land development process. It's a very complicated system. We need additional support. We need quite a bit of additional support to use that well. And so before we tackle a lot of these other issues, we really want to get that person on board. We are hopeful that we'll have somebody on board by the beginning of October. We've just opened that recruitment last week. So that will affect both of these 2 recommendations. Next, please. Process clarity and consistency. Here you go. Establish a clear starting point for all application types. So our priorities here are to begin with completing the streamline a process for simple permits. So that is things like that can be easily done, such as gosh, I'm coming hopefully ideally in the long term, things like getting a water heater in, a simple process where you come in, it's an over-the-counter exchange and you don't have to actually submit and wait for a review. The establishing the clear starting point for all application types is, as I said, will be early in the process, but we need to be looking first at the process itself to establish what that point should be. And it may turn out that there are different starting points for different types of projects, but all similar types of projects should be able to have the same starting point, I would hope. The other items on this will take a little bit more work in the process portion of the work, and so those are not as high on the process clarity and consistency. I think if we can get those streamlined approval process for simple permits in place, that will be a huge help to a lot of people right off the bat. Next slide, please. And then these are continue on process clarity. And if we go on, we again think that the dedicating a weekly meeting time for pre-application of staff consultations is a just do it. I want to clarify, we may need to work around that one a little bit with COVID, just understanding what that looks like. But certainly believe that's a very good use of resources to make sure people are starting out the process in the right manner. Identifying for opportunities to reduce or eliminate process steps is a very high priority. Let's not put people through more than they need to go through. or have staff working on more than they need to be working on, so they can focus their time and resources on the higher priority issues. The amending ordinances to focus the scope of permit plan review is something that's needed if we want to change the manner and the scope of the work we're doing. We believe that we need to do some evaluation and process steps. I do believe that we will likely come back with this in relatively short order because we are looking at workload issues, and being able to focus our scope in a way that is meaningful and yet still meets our vision will be very important to increasing the efficiency of the process. And then evaluating the stormwater regulations against peer communities is very important, and it's currently under review as the Creek staff is currently working on updates to their stormwater regulations. And so as part of that, they have been looking at what communities require and what our regional board requires. And I do believe they will be at full council before very long with recommendations on that item. Next slide, please.
I have a question.
Yes, please, sorry.
For the first one where you mentioned dedicated weekly meetings, you can still do them through GoTo meetings. I mean, even though we have this COVID situation.
Yeah, the challenge is that you're looking at really large, complicated plan sets. So yes, we can do it. It's more difficult than doing it in person because you're not sitting around the table pointing at things together. But that's one of the things that we believe technology and we believe Excella can help us do. But it's a little bit more complicated at this point. It's also a little more complicated is because we still have the office somewhat closed down and people working remotely. So it's not, we won't get that started this week, for example, but we certainly will be working towards getting that done as quickly as possible. We have already worked to draft the counter operation guidelines for what to expect in our public spaces when we begin reopening. And we will begin reopening probably with appointment only, which will allow us to accommodate this kind of meeting.
Thank you.
Sorry, and one last challenge to that is, unfortunately, with all of our childcare facilities and schools closed, a number of our staff are challenged in their ability to meet in person because they're having to do double or triple duty right now. Next slide, please. So design review process. Can create clear objective design review standards for board designs. And that will commence in early 2020. We have a state grant. This is actually a state requirement. So we need to do this and we will be doing this. So, but we have got funding for that. So we won't begin that until that funding becomes available. And then a staff report for staff template for design boards, that will be coming. I do not believe that that's as high focus. My preliminary focus for this design review process is really to be looking at our internal processes as much, and then moving more to the discretionary boards thereafter. And then reduce the number of design review triggers. I think that that's a more complicated conversation and one that we really need to get the process down first, whereas there are a number of people who would like less design review. There are a number of people who would like more. So that's one that we will need to work with this subcommittee to work out. But again, I don't think that's one of the ones that will be one of our earlier actions. Next slide, please. So again, on the recommendations for design review, create examples of pre-approved designs. So this is a very high priority. It's something that we can do for things like fences, where we have a pre-approved design that if you go into HLC and you want to put in a fence, here's one that they've already approved and doesn't need approval. That's what we're talking about here. That's a high priority, but we need to come up with those designs and we need to take them through those bodies for approval so that they are in fact pre-approved. And then eliminate the single family design board. You will have gotten comments on this. This is not without controversy. And those of you who've been involved in this process for a while remember that this design review board came around as a way to address some of the issues that were being felt by the community. So this is one that will need to come later and will take a lot more input from the community and through the process. I think that my guess is that if we're able to change some of the other things around this process, the concerns about the single family design board may lessen, and it may be that this is a very good venue, but I think it's too early in the system to decide whether this is a good recommendation or not. And I would suggest that we put this to much later in the process. Next slide, please. Staffing and organizational structure. Let's go to the recommendations on this one, please. So the transfer of the Creeks Division to the Public Works Department is something that can be analyzed and with a recommendation to the subcommittee and the full council. That is typically done as a part of the budget process, which we will start on in the November, December, maybe even January timeframe. So that will not be a high priority, and with all the other moving pieces in this process, I think that keeping it where it is at this point in time makes the most sense. We do currently and will continue to monitor building inspection workload and adjust staffing accordingly. Now, there's a caveat there. We adjust staffing by moving people back and forth through different divisions and different priorities. I don't want it to sound as if we're just going to be terminating and hiring. We will be adjusting staffing to those functions, not adjusting staffing. So that's something that we currently do. If we have vacancies and our workload is slowing, we hold those vacancies. If we are fully staffed and our workload is too much, we look for additional support, and that will continue. An LDT staff committee to dissolve and discuss and resolve cross-departmental issues. Again, that's just do it. We will put that team together and we will commence meetings of that at a regular schedule. And then training the counter staff to better assist walking customers and developing a robust onboarding process for land development team staff are both recommendations that I think are very good recommendations. I think we need to do some other work before we get to those good recommendations. Next slide, please. So that's our preliminary assessment of how we're going to slice and dice this to get going on it. You know, sort of trying to take it in manageable bite-sized bites and take the highest priorities first so that we can come back to you with some frequency and tell you where we're making progress. So I'd like to take a pause in my presentation here, Chair Friedman, for your committee's conversation and any questions you may have.
So I'll open it up for questions from my colleagues right now, then we'll do public comment and then wrap up with our own comments similar to what we do at council. So this is the question time for Ms. Bjork. Are there questions?
I have one question. Can we go back to the slide of the vision, please, Ms. Bjork?
Yes. So we are kind of having a little delay occasionally, and that may be happening now, but if we can get to the vision slide.
And Chair Friedman, Ellen Kokinda, if I may, and just interject for one moment, and Ms. Bjork as well, we also, I just want to remind that we might want to discuss the meeting minutes format if there's a preference on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the land development staff leadership group will be having a discussion about the vision of the work. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And how is that leadership team going to then relate it to their staff that they oversee?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And so I have been involved in this process in the past, and creating a good cross-departmental representation of people who are invested in the process and have an interest in creating change to come to the table and work jointly in a group that's manageable, but also represents all of the interests to come up with a vision that all people believe is truly what we should be doing. And then when you've got that vision developed, and usually it's done as part of three pieces: a mission, a vision, and the values, the supporting values. And the supporting values are very important. So the vision is really, what do we want to look like? What do we want this process to be? what are we representing for the community and for our staff members in how we go about doing our work. And establishing that really helps us to understand all of the underlying functions that we're doing need to line up to lead to that vision. So if your vision is to be a department that is efficient, effective, and represents the interests of all of the community, then how do you align your process to be efficient, effective, and represent the interests of all of the community? You know, so that's just an example. And then the values behind that might be open and honest communication, you know, sharing of mutual goals. So then when you're dealing with staff, and you always do come up with situations where there may be conflicts because priorities can conflict with each other, going back to those value statements that support the mission statement and saying, no, you know, we understand that you would like to do this and you would like to do that, but when you look at our overall arching values that support the vision of where we want to go, we all jointly believe that the values of this team are to work collaboratively to come out with the best interest in the overall public good. So that would be an example of how you communicate it to the staff. For it to mean anything, it does need to be part of the community, the organizational cultural dialogue. And developing that organizational cultural dialogue means really getting the buy-in and commitment of the people who are living that vision and getting them to support the values in their daily conversations with each other. And I can tell you that in my past experiences with this is something that we do with frequency. We've done with frequency in sometimes resolving rubs between different work groups, or just reminding ourselves what we're all working towards. We're all working towards a vision for what the city is doing on behalf of its community.
And will you be giving us a report on how the staff members that are going to be dealing with the public and, you know, expressing the vision on a daily basis, sort of like the training that you or conversations you've had with them? Would you be presenting this type of information to us?
I certainly can. That's certainly easy to do. My expectation is that we will have staff meetings, and that this will be a function of the conversations in our staff meetings, in our land development team meetings, in the counter staff meetings. The vision is how are we working as a team? How are we working for the community? And the implementation of that vision needs to be reinforced by the people participating in that process.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Jordan, any questions at this point? Okay, I don't have any myself either, so now would be the time for public comment. Is there any public comment before there are hands raised?
And maybe we can go to the slide that explains how to do public comment. There we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Friedman, Ellen Kokenda. So if you are participating in the webinar and you'd like to speak on this issue, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. A red hand a hand with a red arrow facing down indicates a raised hand, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak once I call on you. And I see Mr. Fred Sweeney. I have unmuted you, and you will have 2 minutes to speak whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Friedman, and Council. As you may know, I am a current member of the Single Family Design Board. I've been on the board for going on my 10th year now. I've also served as chair for 6 years. I just have 3 quick points. One, under this COVID-19 scenario that we all have to live with, I'm wondering if there's a way that staff can let us know during these meetings how many people are actually watching. Unlike the old days, you could walk into the council chamber and you could kind of figure out the room was full or it was, you know, just a handful of people. So that would be just interesting if we could have that information. Second of all, as you may know, I submitted a 10-page letter to you. I hope you all got it. Just a comment about protocol here. It would have been nice, given the fact that the SFDB is under some scrutiny, if staff, the report is dated August 10th. It wasn't released to the public until last Thursday, which I think was the 19th. it would have been nice had someone from staff had at least called our board chair to say, look, by the way, there's this report coming and it's focusing on the SFDB. We have 7 volunteer members on our board. I don't think, many may not even be aware that this has happened at this point. And we're volunteers. We give a lot of time to make this community better. So I think how that was handled may need to be rethought. And then finally, I have taken a great deal of time to read through the report, including all of the anecdotal comments. As an architect, I tend to agree with most everything said in the report. So I'm interested in seeing how you proceed at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Is there any more public comment?
Mr. Chair, if I could ask Renee to go back to the public comment side, the instructions for how to raise your hand. Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised at this moment, but I want to give other members of the public the opportunity to raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel, and that indicates to me that you wish to speak.
So, while Ms. Kokinda, while we're waiting for that, would it be possible for Mr. Sweeney's first comment just to let us know how many people are on? Is that something we're able to do?
Yeah, there are 16 attendees currently on the webinar, in addition to the members of the staff and council members attending.
Okay.
And I do not see anyone else who has raised their hand at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kokinda. So I will close public comments at this point, and the next to follow up is now for comments from my colleagues on the proposal and going forward, and I'd like to hear from you. So we'd like to kick it off. Mr. Jordan, you look like you're ready to go.
Okay. I kind of like, well, I kind of am impressed by Mr. Sweeney's comments. There was a slide early on that talked about the breadth of all the staff departments or divisions that were involved with this, even though it's focused on community development. And I think it would be nice for the city to, and beneficial, to send a notice to the relevant boards and commissions, just alerting them, the individual board and commission members, that this process has started. Give a link to the website and the agenda page and where you can sign up to get the push results, just so they can chime in along the way as they see or hear something that that either resonates with them or has a direct connection to where they were going. So love to see that. That's really my only recommendation. And then I just have a couple comments. You see this and you just start to shake your head a little bit about a process, an exercise, the exercise we're going to go through. And I just want to, I guess, say that my intent is not just to go through an exercise because we paid for a report and council said, let's go through the exercise, but to truly go through the exercise to get somewhere, to effect change. And so that's my goal. And there will probably be moments along the way where my opinion might just be that we're just going through the exercise, and I want to get down in the weeds a little more to see that there's a point to what we're doing that is leading to a beneficial change. Then another comment I wanted to make was that it's this is in no way a hunt to point blame at anybody. And my personal participation in this, and one which I hope will be the same as staff, is that we're participating as peers in this process. We might not be on paper, but I intend to participate in peers. I intend to bounce ideas. I intend to have ideas bounced off of me. I would much rather serve as a resource and a sounding board than somebody who just has to make a decision at the end of that. I think you end up with a better process. And then the items that we've had shown to us today and the particular priorities and the emphasis points and what we'll make for later are the first time we've seen those. And so in that kind of context, and so there's some digestion to have there. And so Ms. Bjork, part of my hope when we digest those is that we will continue to focus on items that can make a big difference and can be implemented quickly. And if you had one of those matrices on big difference and speed at which implementation, that's the intersection I'm looking for. Ones that start to see a return with the community and can be done not in 2 years, not in 1 year, but relatively quickly, because those are immediate wins that starts kind of the enthusiasm or the credibility with the community that change is taking place. And I would rather accomplish a few of those rather than say it's going to take us a year to do something, and then it's going to take us a year to do something else. So I'll continue to look for those, and I'll probably next time we meet, I'll have some feedback on how you've laid this out as to which should wait, which are now, after I think about it a little more. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. Councilmember Gutierrez.
No comment.
Okay, so I just have a few comments. I concur with my colleague, Mr. Jordan, on a lot of this. But first, I want to address our staff that's watching. Just to want to acknowledge that you have a very complex and very high pressure job in the community development department. And along the lines of what Councilmember Jordan was discussing is that we want to use this as an opportunity to really be a resource, but also look at the systems and give you the training and the tools that you need to basically move forward and have better outcomes, but also the tools that you need to get where you want to go. And I think that starting off with the vision is important, like Ms. Bjork was stating, because then we have that buy-in of what we want. So I'm looking forward to being a sounding board and being part of this process. And then I also just want to say again that I like the approach of the short-term, medium, and long-term issues that we can make the changes, so we have those that we can implement, the just do it's, as you call them, and then kind of the medium range and the long range, and we can adjust those as we go. So I think that's a good process going forward. And then I kind of fit those into the 3 C's, which is communication, clarity, and consistency. And I think communication is what we're really focusing on up front, those internal communications, both between the different departments and internally, as well as with the public. And then with that, that's really what I'm looking forward to seeing out of this. And we will constantly adjust as we go, but I think we have a very real opportunity here to make some impacting change while making the process more smooth, but also protecting the community's ability to participate in the land review process. Because I think that's the other important part of this, is we want to make sure that we have the ability for our community to still participate. And so with that, do you need anything else from us on this particular point? I was thinking we need to figure out when we want to meet, and we can discuss the minutes format. Do you have some suggestions, Ms. Bjork, on the minutes format?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make a comment. I don't think that it was clear from Mr. Sweeney's comments that I do want the public to know that the Novak report and a link to the webpage that we've made for this committee and this oversight process were sent out to all members of boards and commissions on the 19th of August. So I did want to make sure that you knew that had been communicated. With regard to the minutes, my recommendation is that we do action minutes, more or less, where it is the item being discussed, the action taken by this committee, as well as just a very short recap of the significant issues or significant conversation leading to an action.
And that would be similar to most of our boards and committees and councils. So I'm supportive of that. And unless there's any objections, I don't see any. That's the consensus. And then in terms of a schedule, normally we wouldn't be able to meet on a Tuesday. So do you have any certain dates in mind, or do my colleagues have dates in mind that we could meet?
Chair Friedman, I think that the best thing to move forward at this point is probably for us to work with your administrative staff in the city administrator's office to try and find whether we can establish a recurring meeting date for this meeting, you know, something like the first Thursday of each month or something along those lines, so that the staff, so the public can know when to expect it. In the event that we are unable to find a time that works for everybody, we will need to probably notice these in a manner that makes sure that the community knows when the meetings are. And we have set up the web page to try and have that be a readily available form of communication for people. You can go to that web page and sign up for notifications about this land development oversight process. So if anyone is watching and hasn't already signed up for notices, I would encourage them to do that.
Okay, great. So we will work with our assistant to schedule the next meeting and reoccurring meetings. The format that you had was for the next 2 meetings would be September, October, and then restart again in January. I think there's support from that from my colleagues. And I don't see anything else on the agenda. Do you need anything else from us at this point, Ms. Bjork?
No, thank you, but we look forward to working with you on this.
Great, thank you, everyone. And we'll close the meeting, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.